Okay, welcome everyone. So my name is Sarah Pujol. I'm the founder and director of Pluribus. Pluribus is a global diversity and inclusion consultancy. We are very privileged to work with international companies all over the world to support individuals, teams, managers to really succeed through diversity and inclusion. And end of the 2016, we were very happy to celebrate our 10th anniversary. And to mark this occasion, we wrote a collective book, Inclusion Around the Clock. And this book was actually written by 12 different authors. So that's the book. Very proud of having this symbolic gift, milestone. So what we've decided to make sure that this book was going to be alive and not just something to put in your bookshelf, we decided to run a number of free webinars, actually hosted by the different authors of the chapters. So today I'm specifically delighted to introduce you Alain de Bruyne. Alain is based in Belgium, is working with Pluribus for really a big number of years, nearly from the very beginning. So Alain is going to talk about his chapter and is going to get some insight from Sarah. He will give you the overview of the session. So Alain, thank you for hosting this session, and I would say the floor is yours.
Thank you, it's my pleasure. Welcome everyone, and also future viewers, because we are gonna record this so that also people who couldn't be with us today can enjoy this workshop. So it's actually really my first webinar that I'm gonna give. So if I'm a little bit clumsy, my excuse for that, but I'll do my best. There's always have to be a first for everything. Now, there will be also possibility to ask questions, so you just send questions to us, and then when we'll find the time, we'll answer that. If we don't find the time to do this during this webinar, we will send you back with emails and answer your question. Now, I remember in the beginning of the year, we were deciding to make this book, and it was not easy to find a chapter I wanted to write on, because when we were talking about inclusion, there are so many topics you could address. I mean, there is equality of gender, there is business case, there is intercultural communication, inclusion in general. And then I thought, maybe I should talk about a topic that we don't talk so much, actually. And I'm a teacher. That's where my education started. And I'm very passionate about education in general, bringing up children, and I think that we don't think enough, or that we are not realize what moving abroad and living in another culture when you have children, or just also as a person, we are aware what it does with us. So I thought this is something we don't do so much. We are not so much asked by companies to focus on that. So I thought, let me write something about that. And I had the pleasure to work with a lot of people in the past who moved abroad, who lived in other cultures, and combined with lots of reading I did, and with experience, I wrote this chapter. Now, this chapter has like two parts. There is one part I will talk about the phases we go through when we go and live in another culture, and also the second part will be about what it does for children growing up in bi or multicultural environments. Now, I'm very happy and grateful for Sarah that she will join us. Sarah will present herself after this, but it's always nice to have also like, okay, this sounds nice, this sounds good, but how do real people really experience? So maybe Sarah just can give a few words about yourself, and then I will start to explain the first part of my chapter.
Sure, thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Sarah. I am 24 years old and I live in London. I am originally French from my parents' nationality, but I was actually born in Belgium. And through the expatriation of my parents' work, I actually moved all across Europe my whole childhood and never actually lived in France. So this is definitely a topic that is close to my education and my lifestyle, and very excited to discuss all of this with everyone.
Thank you, Sarah. Now, maybe important before I start, when I talk about culture, when I said you move to other cultures, I think it's important, my definition that I use for that in generally is like culture is kind of a dynamic of a group. And it's very interesting when you hear this, that you keep in mind, it doesn't have to be like in another country or to complete to the other side of the world. It just can be like somebody who lived for a long time with their parents and they just moved to the closest city, which is also a difference of cultures, and they go actually through the same phases. Now, there are many reasons to moving abroad or going to another culture. It can be out of love, which is the most funny one maybe, or the most nicest one, but it can be for opportunities, it can be for job reason, for safety reason. There are many reasons to do this. And to explain which phases we go through, I'm going to do this a little bit graphic for people who have more like an image vision on things, so that will help them with them. So I'm going to move here, and don't worry, I'm not writing on my closets. There is like a whiteboard on it, so don't worry about my closet. So actually, when most people move, I'm going to just bring this a little bit closer. When most people move, in the beginning, they feel kind of happy. Now, let's say this is kind of the happy phase. And why is this? Because it's new, it's an opportunity, things happening. Then this is the line of the emotions, and down here, you kind of feel not so good. Now, this is the line of time, and you are just in between those emotions. Now, most of the people, when they come and arrive in a new environment, a new culture, they're quite excited. They kind of feel happy, you know, and there's new things to explore. There is opportunities, a new job that starts, so we're quite happy. But then after a while, where you're somewhere, you know, it's not so nice, it's difficult to connect with people, and you go like kind of down in these emotions, till there is a point that you're really like, what am I doing here? Why did I do this? Like, it doesn't work really well. And you don't feel so well in your emotions. You're not really on top of your feeling good. Well, from there on, you have like different possibilities. You have those people, and I'm of course generalizing, because otherwise I can't give a format, so it's good there is always a lot of exceptions. But there is also a lot of people who think like, you know what, I am gonna really adapt myself completely to the new culture I am. I am not gonna, I forget my old culture where I come from, I forget my home culture, I have nothing to do with it anymore. I'm now in this new environment and I'm gonna complete adapt. And so these people, they really feel quite well after a while. And what they do is they only go have friends from the new culture they live in. They only go to eat the food where they are now. They only have interactions with people from the new culture. And it's what called, the name that we give to this is assimilation. People completely imitate in the new environment they are. Now, they feel good in the beginning because, you know, they make new friends, they know how to move in the new environment. But it's also a dangerous one because there are moments in life when things just doesn't go the way you want it to go. Suddenly you see that this new environment is not responding like what gives you comfort because it's not your culture. So they have another way to comfort you, or you have the feeling it's not comforting you. And suddenly you get very disappointed because you did so much effort to become part of it. And suddenly you feel that still people will see you as different. And they will still not, maybe just not invite you to certain parties, or you will have the feeling that you're excluded. And for you, this is such a downer because you did so much effort to become part of it, and still they approach you as a different one. So you will kind of fall down again where you started. The second way to look at or to react is a lot of people who go to another culture, they become like very, they start to idealize and to romanticize the culture they come from. And physically, they are in the new environment, but with their heart and their mind, they keep on being in the home culture. And they only will move and only go to shops and only talk to people from their home culture. They even if it's possible, they will still going back to the doctor where the original went from, to the hairdresser the original went. They will always go back. If they live further, they will save money, and from the first time they can, they will go back to the home country. When they are back in the new culture, the first thing they do is counting the days when they will go back again to the home culture. So this is actually a quite isolated. These people also, most of the time, they go live in an area where there is only people who are like them, who have the same original culture. So that is what we would call more segregation. Now, I don't have to tell that this is not ideal, of course, because you have the risk to be isolated in the new environment. So you have this amazing opportunity to go into another culture that can enrich you, but on the other side, you just stay, you create kind of a new home culture in your own environment. Now, there is a third way that is good, because it's maybe the better one, but that's up to you to decide, of course, which is kind of in between being very happy and not so happy, and it's that what we call participation. It is that place where you really keep on doing things that you are doing in your home culture, making the kinds of food that you do in your home culture, but at the same time, you will also reach out to the other ones. You will also do things in this new culture. And this doesn't mean that you will have no nostalgia, because this is always going to happen when you move to another culture. But you will have enough environment to connect with the new culture. Now, this is what we call participation. And it's easy said, but it's not at all very easy to come here where you don't feel on the top of your game, where you kind of feel sad and nostalgia and down. It's not easy to make that move to the other ones. And depending to which culture, and now I'm talking about ethnic culture, but depending on which culture you go to, you live now, it's also very different. I mean, you have certain cultures who show their hospitality in a much more going out way, that will go to you and invite you and do things with you. So it's easier to participate in this kind of cultures. You have other cultures which are most of the time more northern cultures that will more showing their hospitality by doing your thing. But that's not an easy one. I mean, if you move to a culture where hospitality is shown by do your thing, feel home, it's up to you to make the move and to connect with the other ones, which is really not always easy, especially as you don't feel very well. And I experienced it myself, which was quite surprising, although I knew this theory, and I moved in my own country, Belgium, from one city to another city, where we have different language use. And in the beginning, I was like excited about the new cities and all the possibilities. But after a while, I saw myself thinking, what am I doing here? And I only could see the negative parts of the city. And I knew that this was part of my process I had to go through. But what I was doing, and although I know the theory, and I was surprised it happened with myself, I saw suddenly myself more and more go to the same friends that speak my language, the same bars or environments where I knew that there would be a lot of people that actually speak my language. And it's good that I knew this theory, because I forced myself, like, I can't do this, because before you know it, you actually fall down in this little small world you create, and then you have no added value to go and mix in another culture. Well, what is interesting also to know, when coming back what I said about upbringing and children and families, when you go abroad for your job, you're living in another environment, is that the whole family goes through this. It's not only you as an expat who has his job or her job there that you go through this. Now, the thing is, the rhythm we go through this can be very different. I mean, there are some people who can stay in here in the top and feel very excited for like a year, 2 years, 3 years. But you have people who are like in 4 weeks already there. So it depends, it's very individual. And that has to do with your abilities, with your background, what you're used to, etc., and social economic status. It has to do with so many things. And it's not predictable. You cannot say like, okay, I'm going there now. But what is interesting to know, I think, and what helps a lot of people when I explain this frame, is the fact when you go abroad in family, is that you don't move together through this. You go through it together, but not at the same rhythm. So often, especially the person as an expat who has another job already, that person, she will have it easier to participate because she has like colleagues and she's easier, she speaks the language maybe already, it's easier to connect with the environment. On the other hand, the husband or the partner of the woman who goes as an expert, maybe for the partner, it's much more difficult to connect what's going on. And for the children, again, they go much faster maybe because they go to school, or one of the child goes faster and the other one does not. So it's very important to be aware and to be very supportive and nice with each other. It's not because you are already here that the rest of the family is also there. So be aware that people go through different rhythms through this. Now, what would I give as advice when you go to another culture is, first of all, inform yourself very well. Inform yourself about the country, just like numbers. What is the structure of the country? How many people are living there? What can I expect? Also try to inform you. I mean, it's so easy now these days to inform yourself about the culture. What are cultural habits? What is the way to do it? Try to understand something about history. History makes us are part of who we are today. Our own history makes us who we are, but also the collective energy, the collective history makes us who we are today. So understanding the history of a country helps us also to understand behavior of what is going on. Now, there are always different kinds of history. There is the official written history that you can find, but much more important is to ask people about history, because there is the collective knowing about history, which is not always the same as a written one. And it's very important to check with different people how they look back to the history. And out of that, you can learn a lot how society is built up and where some behaviors and interactions are coming from. And another advice that I would give, which is maybe the logical but not always so easy, is you should at least learn a basic of the language where you go to. I mean, if you have to participate to feel more fulfilled in the new environment you will go in, it's tremendous important that you can communicate with people. Because if you stay to only communicate with people who are like you, I mean, you're not going to have the advantage of being in another culture. And then for two other things, what I've done all the time, and I'm even sure that Sarah can give some examples about that, is that the last two ones is that if you are a partner of anybody, somebody who doesn't all day meet other people and it's easy to participate, I would invite you to do volunteer work. Volunteer work works on two levels. On the first level, it's just social interactions going on. You will connect with people from the new environment. But also, not only that, the fact that you are volunteering, it also shows that you care about that new society. So you contribute to the new society, new environment. And that's also a way to participate in this new environment. And the last thing that I would advise is that just do something where you have a passion about. If you're a sports person, if you love music, just go and find other people who like that. You already have something in common. Even if you don't speak the language very well, you have a passion in common. If you like cooking, just go do some cooking course. Just try to find what makes you tick. And you can do in any culture what makes you tick. And then there's always going to be other people who have the same passion. And that's where you will encounter people. And that will help you to participate and then also to bring the fruits into you and your family of just being in another environment. Now to finish this, and before I go to Sarah to give some examples on that, just a thought to take with you, which is I find very interesting, when I discovered that you go through these options or through these phases when you go and live in another culture. But just keep in mind, in the back of your mind, that most of the time the people around you, the new society, they actually also go through this with the new person that comes to them. And just, it's also, you have those people, for example, that are very excited that there is new people in their environment, and they will take care of you and they will really do your best. And then some days they just realize that you don't want to come to their party. They will be very disappointed and they say, like, it's so much effort for you and you don't recognize me. So they actually can go also through these different layers. You have people who don't want people from another culture coming to them and that really wants to segregate and go away from them. So it's just a nice thought to think about it, how this works in both ways actually. But of course, you only have an impact, or your first impact is on your own evolution. And only knowing this helps you also where you are. I remember that a lot of people who were expats who moved to other countries were very grateful that they realized, why do I feel like this? Now I understand why, because I have no reason. I'm happy, I'm here with my family, money-wise we have it good, it's a nice environment, and what's going on with me? So just to understand that you go through these phases, and know, be sweet with yourself. Know it can take time and it needs also time. But just remember, from here to go there, it won't happen on itself. It only will happen when you do the effort. It's you who has to go to the other one. It won't come knocking on your door, probably. Okay? So this is the first part of my chapter about moving abroad. So let's now listen to Sarah, because I suppose, Sarah, that you have lived this even a few times, and I'm wondering how you managed that, and if you, especially also if you were aware that you will go through this phase. And I know that when we prepared this, that you even moved to a new culture again, not quite recently actually. And I'm actually interested to hear about how you did that.
Sure. Wow, there's so much that comes up when I hear you talk about all this that really feels relevant to my upbringing and my education. Just to start off, I think that I should just describe a little bit about how I see culture and how I associate with the French culture. The thing is, actually, I don't really associate with the French culture, unfortunately, not to the level where I would really call myself a national French. It's always interesting when I meet new people because my accent can be a bit confusing to people, actually. I have a bit of a sort of American twang, but sometimes it sounds a bit British. Obviously, I've lived in England now 6 years. So the first question is, where are you from? And I'll say, oh, I'm French. Really? You're French? You don't sound French. Where are you from in France? Well, actually, I was born in Belgium. Oh, so you're Belgian? Not really. Actually, I'm French. And so it brings up all these questions. So actually, the sense of culture for me is really opened up to a sort of global culture. And like I've said before, I've moved around my whole education, my whole upbringing. I lived in England when I was 5 years old. I moved to Germany when I was 9, moved to Belgium, back to Belgium when I was 13. And then as an adult, I decided to move to England when I was 17. So it's interesting. I kind of find myself almost as a citizen of Europe, or dare I say, sort of the world. So I think I've gone through different phases whenever I moved, with the association of culture and feeling like I belonged or that I didn't belong, and how I dealt with it. So as a child, I don't really particularly remember moving and what it meant and the impact as much when I was very young. The one I really specifically remember is when we were discussing with my parents leaving Germany, which was really during my key teenage years. And that's when you really become aware of, you know, who your friends and what you like, what you don't like, your after school activities, etc. And I really remember once sort of, you know, going into tears with my mom and saying, oh, I really don't want to move. Can you please stay here? I'm finally becoming friends with people and finally getting down some roots. And I think we ended up staying an extra year in Germany, actually, after the discussion. Whether it was, you know, because of that or not is up for discussion with my parents, I guess. But yeah, I think that when I moved to England as an adult, I experienced it very differently. And it's really interesting, the graph that you draw, because as you said, everyone goes through it differently. And when I moved to London, once I had graduated from my studies, I think I went down to the negative very, very quickly. I find myself, I made that conscious decision to move to London by myself, barely knowing anyone in London. I only had sort of one very good friend. And I found myself stuck in the negatives of just feeling very lonely. I mean, London is a huge city. And it's true that it's kind of known for, it's busy and there's always people moving and lots to do, but actually it can have a very negative, lonely impact on you. So I don't think it's just the culture of the UK. It's very much the culture of a city itself as well. London being so international, I thought that with my international background and the fact that I associate with being international would actually be a plus. But in this instance, it was so overwhelming, all these different cultures, that I actually found myself closing in a bit. And like I said, feeling lonely and wondering what I was doing there. And it actually took me quite a while, probably about a year and a half, to really adapt to all these different cultures that can be in London. And it's interesting, everything you said, the different phases of how you cope with being in a new culture, whether you try to find people that are like you, that are, you know, in my case, French. And actually, I found myself doing the opposite because it's confusing for me, the association of being French and where home is. I actually kind of consciously moved away from being with French people. And I really remember, especially when I was at university, you know, I could have joined lots of French social groups or, you know, anything to do with reconnecting with the French culture. And actually, I really consciously didn't, which is interesting when I think about it now, because there are lots of things about French culture that I miss. And even just speaking French sometimes is something that I miss. I find myself not speaking a word of French for periods up to, you know, 3-4 weeks, unless it's with my family. So yeah, everything to do with French culture is maybe more coming up now as an adult than as a child. I think as a child, it was very much any culture I found myself in is the one that I had to accept. And as an adult here, it really has helped me to connect with London and get to know London through social groups, as you said. And in my case, it's I play basketball, and I can very clearly say that throughout the 6 years I've been in England, my key friends, my core friends, have been people that I've met through basketball. So,
okay.
Yeah. I just wrote down a few notes while you were talking. I think that as I grew up as well, I recognized that the sense of home is a bit of a questioning when you're an international expat kid. And I mean, this might sound a bit cheesy, but it just really, home really became wherever my parents were. So that is the closest sense to home that I ever had. And actually, Belgian culture, I realize, is not too far off from French culture. And I remember the first couple of years at university when I left Belgium, I did do that sort of automatic thing of when am I coming back? And when am I booking the weekend where I can come back? And I did go home and go to the hairdresser, go to the dentist, all those things that I kind of associated with this is home. And when I'm in England for this purpose. And yeah, it took me quite a while to adapt and really even call this place home. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And this brings me automatically, I mean, everything what you said brings me automatically to the next subject of the chapter, where I want to go in it, what an effect it can have and has, or sometimes has, when you are brought up into cultures, when you have these two influences. And I mean, I'm not telling anything new when I say that children need kind of stability. And I like when Sarah said, like, home is that stability, just there where my parents are is stability. And of course, it is very important. It doesn't mean that children can't handle different cultures. On the contrary, children are by nature quite flexible. So they can do it. They can do it, actually. Now, I'm going to explain my chapter again with a graphic and with an example, very concrete example of a story that I actually live by, and it was such almost proof and interesting how the theory about what happens with children, I think, explains it very well. So I'm just going to hang this new paper on the buckets. There we go. Now, the story is, and the example is about a family from Sudan that moved to Belgium. And this is two engineers that has to come to work to Belgium and who were really great to come here. So they were very positive towards the new culture and really wanted to learn. So this is a Sudanese family who goes to Belgium. They have two children, which are two girls. Now, it's a very good thing and natural to, when you bring up your children, that you will pass by your values and parts of your identity, what you find important. It's what you got from your family. You will adapt at a time a little bit. You will give through value that you find important. And that's why I always recommend, whenever you bring up your children, speak your mother language with your children. It's your most closest to yourself. It's your authenticity. So do this, feel free. Even if you live in another culture, don't be afraid to talk your mother language with your children. So these engineers, they of course, they will give parts of their identity, of their culture to their children. So these children will have Sudanese input. Now, like Sarah told, there is that French part that she got, although she never lived in France, but her parents were from French origin, so she will have also this French input. Now, on the other hand, these children, they live in a Belgian environment, so automatically, just by being in that environment, you will also have these Belgian influences on your identity. They will become part of your identity. So these children, they have two cultures. Now, the thing is that often people, and Sarah gave also an example, they want to reduce you to one identity. And sometimes I hear people say, oh, you have two cultures. So, and I'm like, what is this? Two parts. Which part are you then French, or which part is then, in this case, Sudanese? I mean, it's really, you are two parts completely. You are complete, you're not half Sudanese and half Belgian. Now you're completely Sudanese and you're completely Belgian. It's like, you're also the child of your parents. You have your mother and you have your father. They're both your parents. You can have perfectly several roots. And so it's one of the things I get really angry when I see this happening again and again, when people ask and judge and decide then which identity you have. And you see it often in interviews with people who moved for different reasons, that they should reduce people to one identity. So it's very important to keep on seeing that someone can really, authenticity, complete, be different identities when it comes even to cultural identity. Now the thing is that from time to time, there can be some contradictions in this one culture or another culture. And I'm going to give two examples, and don't run away that this is this or that culture. It's just two examples that we talked about when I talked with the parents. And one of the things that the father told me that really surprised him, I think I can say, or even at the edge of shocking him, when he came to Belgium, that was that some of Belgian peoples, they are showing their affection to somebody else in public environment. They hug, they kiss each other while they're waiting on the station. And for him, from his lenses, it was completely not done. You don't have intimacy in a public space. So for him, that was really a contradiction between the Sudanese, his own culture, and the Belgian culture. You could kind of see a contradiction. Another one who is much more clear and maybe much more sensible was about virginity. So for this family, this virginity is something very important for a girl. And so it's very important for this family, when the girls marry, they are still virgin. It's even the honor of the family that they are still virgin. Now, this is, of course, values, and it should also be values that the father will give to his children, because this is what is also say something about him, because he still has family, he still has friends from Sudan. So it's not something that you just can put aside. So, but in Belgium, being married and virginity is a complete other thing. And be careful, I'm not valuing here something. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I'm just trying to, let's call it cultural habits, just one and the other. But I want to use this example because it's quite clear. Now, in Belgium, it's almost the opposite. If you are someone from 26 years old and you would say that you would marry with somebody from 24 and that person is still virgin, I'm sure that a lot of parents in Belgium would say like, uh-oh, you should check this out. It would be even, it's really contradictional. Although, again, I'm not valuing, it's just a difference. So these children, although it can look as a contradiction, these children are brought up in these two worlds. Now, it's not such a problem because, again, even with two roots, a child can move still. They know how to move through these differences. So when the problem comes, and Sarah also talked about that, it's the teenagers' years. Why is that? Because in the teenager years, you start to ask yourself, who am I? Where am I? Which group do I belong? But not only that, also society starts. Who are you? Why are you doing this? Are you making this choice? And there's a lot of pressure starting to go. Now, what we have then is that you start to have like what I call in-house and out-house behavior. So when the children are in the house, they will behave very Sudanese. They will behave very much as they should behave according towards that environment. But when they are in a Belgian context, they will also, because it's their nature, it's not a playing that they do, it's just who they are also, they will behave like it's kind of expected in that part. Now the problem is, and that can be a problem, or can be very difficult, is that when these worlds combined, most of the children are very good in kind of dividing these worlds. But it's not always possible, of course, in society. So what you have sometimes, just imagine the example that the father sees his daughter waiting to go to school in a Belgian environment, and he says to his daughter, like, what is this? What is this kind of behavior? You never do this when you're at home. I'm disappointed in you. And you see on the other side that Belgian friends, they say like, oh, I saw you yesterday with your mother in the shop. And when you're with your mother, you're completely different. What is this? And what is can be very difficult for the children is that they are actually here complete alone. And nobody really understands them. Everybody has other expectations, but there's rarely that other people understand really this duality with who they are, not what they do, but who they are. Now still, again, children are very strong and flexible. And they move through it, but the pain or the difficulty can be depending on how much these two worlds are contradiction or people are pulling. And I always compare it a little bit. It's like with children who are between a very difficult divorce. If you are as a child, you are standing between your mother and your father, and the mother is always saying bad things about the father and vice versa. As a child, you are kind of torn between those two. You can't choose, you just can't, because you are a child of both mother and father. And these processes very similar when we are talking about two cultures. You cannot choose between one culture or another because you are both. Now, again, they are very good in moving through this. What we often see, and I'm talking about living for a long while, and this family is still living in Belgium already now, they are teenagers, these girls. Now, when it becomes difficult, and in every culture it's something similar, or almost every culture we do, it's what I call marriage. Because what is marriage? Marriage in almost any culture that I know is putting yourself in front of your community and saying, I commit to this person. And the format and the colors are different, but this is always the essential of marriage. Now, just can you imagine these children, when they will marry, they will go and stay in front of their communities and will have made a choice. Will they marry with somebody from here, or will they marry someone from here? There is a big chance that there is always one side who will be disappointed. There is always a side that says, like, why not somebody from here, from your hometown? Are we not good enough for you? Or the other way will say, like, why not in the country that you're growing up? Are we not good enough for you? But this can be very challenging for children being in those two cultures. And as Sarah said, of course, this depends on a lot of things, if it is difficult or not. If you are brought up in an environment that recognizes that you are there alone, it's a big difference. It makes a whole difference for you. It's the same with the child that is in this difficult divorce between those two parents. If these parents, even if their divorce is difficult, but they really assure you and they say, like, it's okay, and I know it's, they recognize that the child is there, it's okay for a child. Children can quite deal very well with the difference going on. It's when they have to make a choice. That's where it becomes very difficult. And another aspect, of course, also, if Sarah said it herself, I said, like, yeah, but France and Germany and UK, it's not also a big difference. So, of course, you will have much more in the middle here in common when you grow up in cultures who are not very different. So that makes, of course, a big difference. Now, it feels like I described a problem, and you're probably like, oh my God, if you are in a situation with children with two cultures, you think like, what did I do? What is going to happen with my children? Now, I always say, like, these children who come out of this situation, and if they are well surrounded, and I will give two tips, two advices how you can best deal with it. These are the most beautiful and well-prepared children to live in the future world, because this globalization, if you like it or not, it's not going to stop. It's only the moving is going to go on, and it's going to happen more. I mean, Sarah is just an example of many people, millennials we have now, who just very easily move for different reasons. But the fact that you are grown up with seemingly complete different or seemingly different values, you learn from little itty bitty, you learned how to deal with it. Just like people who are grown up with different languages. You have people who just look at one person, to their father, for example, and they easily start to speak French. They move to their mother and they will, or a father, they will speak Portuguese. So you will move very easy, and it's the same with values and norms. These children, they are wonderfully prepared for the future, actually. They will become very important for also our company. Now, what can we do? I think, first of all, what is the most important is recognizing that your child is in the middle of two cultures. That's what we often forget. It's one of the mistakes that we often do. And I remember my own mother, she often, although I didn't grow up in these two different cultures, but my own mother, she often said, I really know you, my boy. I really do know you. And I always thought, no, you don't. You just know one part of me. And I mean, it was good she didn't know the other part, but you only know my in-house part. And I think as a parent, you have to know that there is a part of the identity of your child that is happening outside and you don't know. If it is a big different culture or a similar, it doesn't matter, just recognize and dare to talk about it for a child. I think the loneliness is the hardest thing there. But if you, as a parent, you guide that very well, you have the very strong and beautiful children. On the other side, I think that we should stop to reduce people in general to one identity. We are just layers of identity, and the culture that we soak up when we grow up is just one part of that, and can be important and can be evaluating also through life. I mean, I found it interesting that Sarah said, like, now it starts to be my French identity starts to be important. Great. And maybe in 5 years, she's like, oh yes, it's true, I had a French identity. It can evaluate, and that's okay. It's not to you to decide which somebody else has based on a name or where people were born to say which identity they have. So I think if we work on both sides, as a parent, you take care of your child and you recognize this place where they are, the in and out house situation, this duality that they can have in themselves. And as a society, we also stop pointing people in just one little box. I think that we go a very well way. So this is my second part of the chapter, and I didn't give it with this example. I just wrote a little bit more theoretically. But I really do hope, and I got this reaction often when I explain this to people who who lived abroad, that is really helping also to understand their children much easier. I mean, if you think about this and you combine it with what I said before, I mean, it's really something you have to take care of. And that, I think, has happened many times, that people move from one environment and go abroad, just thinking, I move my stuff from one house to another. I really think, and I'm really convinced, that as companies and as human beings with each other, we should take care much more and pay attention that it's just not a change of place where you live. It has a huge impact, which doesn't mean something negative, but it's in our hands to work on that. So I really hope I could inspire you to invest in that, invest for yourself, for your family, and for your members in your job around. So Sarah, I'm going to go back to you, and I would be very curious how this reflect to you and how what did with you when I explaining this.
Yeah, I actually started writing down some thoughts of differences between the French culture and what I've experienced being in England, which is funny. It's like I knew them, but I never really thought about them consciously. Before I go into saying some of these examples, I should probably specify that when I say the French culture, I specifically mean the French Algerian and French Tunisian culture.
Wow.
So my parents from both sides were French Algerian and French Tunisian, and both migrated to France, Paris. So I think that within the confusion of all where am I from and where also that layer of sort of the sort of North African culture, the Jewish community as well, culture. So some of the things that I realized when I moved to England, so I was 17, I was underage, and I was, like you said, in the middle of creating that identity still as a teenager, as a pre-adult. And some of the things that I realized, and this is, you know, sort of maybe stereotyping the UK a little bit, but one of the big things I saw here is the way that people show signs of affection. So you actually brought that up with the sort of greeting someone, but that's very much an in-house thing in my sort of family and my culture, to really be very affectionate and very expressive of your affection, whether it's tactile or in the way you express yourself. In the UK, it's almost like I've had to take a step back with that and kind of give this maybe a bit more cold, a bit less expressive version of myself. And I totally associate it with both. So I think that I would never behave as affectionate and as expressive in a UK condition as I would at home, and obviously, you know, with my family and with the people I'm personal with. But another thing I've noticed in terms of culture is, this is a bit of a cliche one, but the food culture in the UK is very, very different than the food culture in France, and especially in the Algerian, Tunisian culture, very different. And health in general is also something I've had to sort of adapt with here. There's not as much health maybe consciousness in the UK as I grew up with in my mix of cultures. And also things like body image, or the sense of partying and alcohol and things like that. I grew up with very different views on these things depending on all the different countries I went to. In England, it's very much more open and you know, free, and you know, everyone's having a lot of fun in a very different way than I have when I grew up and I was a teenager with my friends in Belgium. So yeah, these are all things that I realize more and more as I grew up, and I understand actually what I went through and what it meant. and I didn't necessarily understand it when I did go for it. But yeah, everything you've touched on it. I think I was very fortunate to grow up, you know, in the environment that I grew up in. Obviously, I grew up with the creation of Pluribus, the company, and all of its diversity and inclusion mindset. So I really grew up with that idea myself, that you have to be open-minded and culture aware. So it really has become a part of my identity. And just one last thing that I thought of was when you talk about being aware of your children and that they're going through that, and obviously the child, him or herself, wanting to not disappoint, especially for things like marriage or any kind of life planning. It's also interesting to think about the previous generation as well. So it's not just the parents, but it might also be the grandparents and what they think about some of these actions, because they might not have the same mindset as your direct parents. But yeah, all of it completely speaks to me, and it's great to see that we can have discussions about it, and I'm sure that there's many more people out there that have gone through things like that.
Yeah. I was just wondering, Sarah, can you elaborate, or did you experience something like the in-house and outhouse personality? Like that, is that something that, like, for example, when you were in Germany, that you said, like, yeah, I could see myself behaving different and I was outside and inside?
I can't quite think of an example for Germany specifically, but I think maybe for England, there's a different sense of respect, I think, that you have with people that are not your direct family or your direct friends. I think that in England, your sort of outhouse personality is to be much more closed off and much more private, and you don't kind of try and find out too much about people. And maybe the in-house personality is to be much more curious and open-minded. And I think that's something that I sort of a behavior that I adopted unconsciously, actually.
Yeah. It happens most of the time, indeed, quite unconsciously. Which brings us back. It's funny that you use that example, because it brings us actually back where we started. When I was talking about, and that's more even a webinar about intercultural communication, about cultural differences, is that indeed hospitality or respect can be shown in many different ways, and is very culturally dictated or culturally habited is around. And it's not about it's cold or it's distant or it's not so nice. It's just what, depending on your lens, that what you're used to, and it's just another way of showing hospitality or respect. And indeed, for some people, showing respect is asking questions about your private lives and having going out together, even in a job context. There's a lot of going on. And while in other cultures, it's more like, let's have a certain distance, which is as much showing respect. But indeed, if you are brought up in another environment, it's kind of like a constantly task not to interpret it as like, oh, they are cold, and as you said, it makes it yourself and you feel comfortable with it now, and this is what is part of your way of working with it.
Actually, one example bouncing off that for Germany, I remember very specifically throughout the years we lived there, while we were still learning German, asking when you were in any kind of outdoor situation, in a shop or anywhere, asking if they spoke English. And I really remember probably about 80% of the time people saying, no, we don't speak English, sorry. And then you actually kind of get into a conversation, and then they do speak English. So that's interesting, because for us as outsiders, it would feel like we're annoying them, like we're getting in their way. And then, you know, kind of almost like a sign of a disrespect in a way, that they won't make that effort. But I think for them, it might just be, I'm not too sure actually from their side what it meant. But it's interesting. That is something that I noticed throughout the years.
Yeah. I think it's wonderful to end up here, because it brings us to what is the beauty of this living abroad and being in an environment with different cultures. You don't actually, I always say, you don't learn so much about the other culture. You learn very much about your own culture, your own lenses, and you get so much inspired by these all different ways of just looking at the same thing, and you get so aware of get so aware of your own lenses and your own culture. And I remember that once an expat told to me, like, actually, going abroad made a better person of me. And I really do believe that this is what is happening. You can think you're open-minded, but by going to other cultures, it's like it's opening your lenses or giving more colors, for sure.
Absolutely.
With those words, I'm going to give you the floor back, Isabel, to round up.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, not only I found the session very insightful, but it was actually really moving as well, you know, hearing Sarah, our daughters, talking about her experience, you know, going abroad with us, you know, in these various countries. I think for me, what the key highlight of this session is really the need to respect really who we are. I really like the way where you're saying, Alan, that as a person, we have different layers, we have different identities. It's very challenging actually to restrict ourselves just one identity. And by hearing the story of Sarah, I mean, it's kind of showing how, you know, all these different experiences abroad made her the beautiful woman she is today. And I'm very proud of you, Sarah, of course. But thank you so much. I think organizations and companies, especially now that we are in a global world where you have a lot of international organizations, international teams, they need to take this topic very seriously. So that session is not just a nice session, it should be a must session for all organizations who are sending people working in you know, abroad, because not only it's, as you said, Alan, very important for the expatriate himself or herself, but for the entire family. So I think that this topic should be repositioned at a more strategic level. But for me, really, what I'd like to close is with two words. The word of uniqueness, the importance of recognizing and valuing our uniqueness because of all the richness of the different experiences. And again, the notion of inclusion. Inclusion is at the heart of everything that you have discussed, both of you, whether it's talking about different example or even talking about the story of Sarah. So now, thank you so much. We have recorded the session, so it will be shared also not only to the participants, but also to the wider network. And next webinar will be on the 31st of March. It will be hosted by Cécile Pernet-Masson, and her chapter is on a very interesting objective, which is how do we reconcile in our diversity and inclusion work our head, our heart, and our hands. So it's really about how do we engage, how do we understand, how do we act to build even more inclusion and diversity. So you know, big invitation for the next webinar end of March. And thank you again, Alan. Thank you for a very lively session. And thank you, Sarah, for being who you are and sharing your story. So thank you, everyone, for your participation, and hope to connect again with all of you very soon. Bye, everyone. Bye.